But dandy all over the gates of hell. All hope abandoned, ye who enter here.
My name is J.M. Berger. I study extremism with a special focus on propaganda, and I do that as a fellow at the International Center for Counterterrorism in The Hague. The Turner Diaries is a racist dystopian novel that has become an incredibly powerful piece of propaganda for white nationalist movements around the world.
In 1978, Pierce began to present his own version of things to the public when he published the Turner Diaries under the pseudonym Andrew MacDonald. At first, the book seemed a harmless fictional account of violent action portrayed against a repressive government. In time, it would be called a very real blueprint for murder.
It's become perhaps the most influential work of white nationalist propaganda since the Nazis. It was written in the 1970s, and it describes a world where blacks and Jews have taken over and are oppressing white people.
The Turner Diaries hits mainline bookstores across America tomorrow morning. It's the imaginary diary of a revolutionary foot soldier named Earl Turner, caught up in the middle of a race war set here in America in the 1990s. Pierce first published the book himself in the underground press back in 1978 under the pseudonym Andrew MacDonald. Since then, it has sold almost 200,000 copies and has become, in a sense, the Bible of far-right militiamen like Timothy McVeigh, who is now awaiting trial for the Oklahoma City bombing.
This book contains racial propaganda. The FBI said it was the blueprint for the Oklahoma City bombing. Many would like it banned. It is being published to alert and warn America. The Turner Diaries by Andrew MacDonald. Some people refer to this as the KKK Bible.
A week ago, I visited William Pierce at his mountain headquarters in rural West Virginia, where we talked in fairly straightforward fashion about his recipe for getting back the America he believes we've lost.
And basically the idea is, we need a white America. Let's get rid of all the blacks. Let's get rid of all the Jews, and we will find ourselves once again. That's basically it.
That's one way, a very crude way of expressing it. I think a more fundamental idea that I expressed in the Turner Diaries is that we need to be responsible for the world around us. We need to stop being just spectators and become participants in the historical process.
It focuses a lot on explaining the reasons for terrorism, how you pick your targets, and what you should expect when you carry out a terrorist attack. The author of the Turner Diaries, William Pierce, was a rocket scientist. He was a physicist, and he slowly became obsessed with issues of race. Around the time of the Civil Rights Movement, he was pro-segregationist. He felt that the media treated segregationists unfairly, so he began to write, first for the American Nazi Party, and then later breaking away and forming his own organization.
If one asks, what was the purpose of the Turner Diaries? It was to provide a fictional medium for certain ideas that I think are very important.
And you knew what you had written about the FBI headquarters being blown. And you knew when you learned that Timothy McVeigh was a devotee of the Turner Diaries. Did you then say to yourself, hey, I wonder if I could have been responsible for some of that?
No, I never did, but I said to myself, I wonder what Bill Clinton and Janet Reno are thinking. I wonder if they have any sense of shame, any sense of guilt at all for having committed that massacre in Waco, which apparently is what inspired the bombing in Oklahoma City.
Now, if a bunch of Chinese men Middle Eastern men, Indian, right? Or if a bunch of African American men want to go off and create for themselves a society off the grid and live away from the government, well, then I applaud that. And it's not an issue of trying to say that one race is superior to another race. But each race was made by God, and each race should have the right to maintain their cultural heritage, and that includes the white race.
On the day of the bombing, when Timothy McVeigh was driving away from the attack, he carried with him an envelope with several sheets of paper in it. Among those sheets were pages copied out of the Turner Diaries. It had highlighted sections that talked about the purpose of terrorism. It was something that he wanted people to see, to understand why he had done what he did.
One man impressed with the Turner Diaries was the racist and affable Robert Matthews. By the time he read the Turner Diaries in the early 1980s, Matthews had already belonged to various neo-Nazi organizations. He was so moved by the book that he sought out author Pierce, who immediately saw Matthews as a man of action.
William Pierce was much more nervous about endorsing Timothy McVeigh than he had been about Bob Matthews.
Perhaps the most bizarre chapter in the book tells of the day of the rope. That's the day when white traitors are strung up by the revolutionary militias.
The people who were executed on the day of the rope were all white people. They were people who had betrayed their race.
Hung from trees, hung from lampposts, hung from stop signs, I mean, there was a whole carnival of
That's
hanging.
right. It was a day of mass hanging.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible all the things that it predicts. And let me see when it was written. It looks like it was copyright in 1978, okay? And when you read about it, it's so incredible how close to the Oklahoma City bombing that it got right. I mean, it's almost like the people that did Oklahoma City just used this book as their model.
Morris Dees first read the Turner Diaries back in 1981. Dees runs the Southern Poverty Law Center, a group which monitors hate crimes and the people who commit them.
When you first heard the details of the Oklahoma City bombing, did you immediately think of the Turner Diaries?
Within 5 minutes.
Do you have any hard knowledge that indeed Timothy McVeigh read the Turner Diaries?
Yes, Timothy McVeigh treated the Turner Diaries as his Bible. Soldiers in the military with him said that he had it, he read it, he encouraged them to read it, and one even said he slept with it under his pillow.
During our time together, Pierce expressed sympathy for such as the Freemen in Jordan, Montana, and the alleged Unabomber. He says Bill Clinton disgusts him, and that he favors shipping American blacks back to Africa. The man William Pierce most admires is Adolf Hitler.
Following Matthews' death, members of the order began to turn on one another in a scramble for leniency with law enforcement. In all, 24 members were indicted. 12 of those pleaded out by the time their cases came to trial. The remaining 12 were found guilty of either racketeering, conspiracy, or murder. The order's revolution had failed, but by crossing the line between words and action, the neo-Nazi movement had a full-fledged hero in Robert Matthews.
I blame it on the fact that we have allowed this society to become excessively cosmopolitan, that we have not had real white leadership.
That's the buzzword. That's the code word, cosmopolitan.
Mm-hmm.
That's Jews and blacks, and you know it is.
Well, if you want to put it that way, but it involves a lot of other people, too. It involves the mestizos coming across our southern border.
Race mixing.
Race mixing is one of the things which is causing the breakdown of American society.
Their attitude is, well, let's not speak out against the government. It's just a given fact that they're corrupt. Americans, we weren't raised believing our government was corrupt. We knew Mexico was corrupt. We know you don't go down to Mexico because the cops will make you give bribes and the whole government is corrupt. But we always had the impression when we were growing up that America was generally a corrupt free nation, or at least that's the perception. I know it ain't now.
Within a year after Robert Matthews was killed by the FBI, you had skinheads who were tattooing his name on their bodies. Hail Robert Matthews. In fact, every year at Whidbey Island, there's a memorial to him on December the 8th to remember Robert Matthews.
With the death of Robert Matthews, the neo-Nazi movement had a new martyr. And with the Turner Diaries as a guide, the bloodshed had just begun.